We're back with another episode of Showcase, TRT World's flagship arts and culture program, coming to you from our studios in Istanbul. Another one of John le Carré's novels has been adapted to the small screen. Later in the show, we'll check out the politically charged storyline of The Little Drummer Girl, and we pay tribute to Pablo Picasso, one of the biggest game changers of the modern art world. But first, we take a look at how a movie festival in Istanbul is giving Turkish independence a chance to go mainstream. A new film looks at racial issues and the US judiciary system. And how a Russian art movement outlived the revolution that inspired it. The movie festival season has kicked off in Turkey. Among the more high-profile events is the annual Bosphorus Film Festival. The Bosphorus Film Festival has spent the past 6 years distinguishing itself from its counterparts by putting an emphasis on independent filmmakers. Let's see how.
Turkey's mainstream movie theatres are packed with big-budget films, with nationally known directors such as Yavuz Turgul and Osman Sinav. Lost in the mix are the independents, left struggling to make a name for themselves. Enter the Bosphorus Film Festival, which has made its mission to put small-time productions on the marquee. In addition to the creative labs directed at low-budget movie makers, this year's event is introducing a new award category and prize money to help establish upstart artists. One such film seeking glory is Debt. This family drama marks the narrative feature debut of director Vuslat Saracoğlu, who had to wait 4 years to realise her project. And now the production is lauded as a contender in the category for Best Turkish Film. The BFF is also championing indie movies from abroad. 88 foreign entries from 41 countries will be screened. And Winter Flies, a film from the Czech Republic, is one motion picture that is receiving all the attention. It won Best Director at the prestigious Karlovy Vary Movie Festival earlier this year, with critics calling the film a charming coming-of-age story.
Excuse me, I'd like to open up an account.
Well, great. What type of account do you have in mind?
This kind.
Speaking of the critics, the BFF also received high marks for adding high-concept potential Oscar contenders into their lineup. One such motion picture that will be making its Turkish premiere is Robert Redford's farewell movie called The Old Man and the Gun. The feature sees the veteran actor reassume the outlaw screen persona that made his career. And the early critical acclaim has many wondering if his last film can finally earn him his first ever Academy Award for acting. With a diverse selection of such important movies, the Bosphorus Film Festival, which starts at the end of this week, already got cinephiles marking their calendars for an event that is expected to be a massive celebration of movie culture.
16 successful escapes.
The rise in the number of recently released films boldly tackling racism and injustice is clearly on the rise. And unlike in the past, films like these, heavy in social commentary, are being marketed to and reaching wider audiences. The latest such feature to hit theaters is managing to intertwine those ideals and tell a tragic love story on top of everything else.
Influenced by both socially conscious movies and emotional high-concept dramas, filmmaker Barry Jenkins brings together his two favourite topics in his latest film, If Beale Street Could Talk. The story, set in the 1970s, sees a woman in love persistently trying to prove her fiancé's innocence after he was accused of sexual assault, only to be neglected at every turn. Mirroring the golden age Hollywood narrative technique of using an invisible camera, the feature manages to provide an in-depth look into both the society at the time while also telling a tragic love story. The film's Academy Award-winning director believes the story itself is as relevant today as it was back in the 1970s.
Just talking about the criminal justice system. You know, I think the systemic issues that African Americans have always faced since the very foundation of this country, and in particular the ones that we seem to ignore. You know, over the last 40, 50 years. I think the power of Baldwin is he was just so prescient. You know, there's just so many things that he wrote about. You know, in this period that are still relevant today.
You know that?
I do.
The film's lead actor says she fears the American judicial system, as well as society, are still not changing for the better.
I'm talking about just the way in which we operate in sections. We're divided still, where the country is probably more polarized now than, or just as polarized as it was in the 70s. Just the difference is it's more hidden, but we're seeing, like right now, the people's true colors are coming out, which I think is a good thing.
With If Beale Street Could Talk, director Barry Jenkins proves he's not just an Oscar-bait filmmaker, something he was accused of in the past, since the sincerity and the emotional drama of the movie are the first two things critics point out as winning ingredients of the film.
Still to come on Showcase, you can now find out what it's like to be a Smurf. Bombs, guns, heartbreaks, and secret agendas. The Little Drummer Girl hits television screens. And we'll visit an artistic revolutionist on what would have been his birthday. Papa Smurf might have looked ancient when you're a kid, but can you imagine that he only just turned 60 years old? To celebrate the anniversary, the real-life hometown of the Smurfs has launched a new exhibition showing you what it's like to battle the evil wizard Gargamel when you're only about 20 centimeters tall. We have this look at the Smurf experience and how the cartoon came to fame.
This is what it feels like to be a Smurf. Whether you are capturing Gargamel or swinging around the village, the designers have brought the fictional world to life.
The idea was to become small as a Smurf and to live an adventure and the size of a Smurf. So our concept is that the Smurfs are 1.2 meter high as an average kid, I would say, and all the scenic elements and props and sets are designed in that size.
Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know, being from Belgium, the Smurfs originally spoke French, before being dubbed into 30 languages.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais là? Moi, j'arrive plus à trouver le sommeil et cet endroit m'a semblé assez calme pour me reposer.
Tu n'arrives plus à dormir?
Toi, tu ne dors plus?
C'est un sort pire que la Schtroumpf.
Introduced in 1958 and written by cartoonist Pierre Culford, the Schlumpfer were initially supporting characters in a comic based in medieval times. Not long after, the Smurfs hit it big with their own series. Now, instead of just watching the cartoon, children and their parents can experience the characters through video mapping and virtual reality.
We enter a forest and we're immediately immersed into the Smurfs' magic universe. At the beginning, the forest is a real size with real size decorations, but little by little, as we move forward, we shrink to the size of a Smurf. That means as tall as 3 apples.
If you're a fan, this is probably not your first Smurf experiences beyond the TV series. You've probably gone to the theme park, bought toys, and more recently got tickets to a live-action flick. Like the one made in 2011, which made a sizable dent in the global box office sales.
We're being attacked! Do not be fooled by their cuteness!
They're friendly.
That's right, you pasted giant.
Welcome to the party.
Inspiring a sequel in 2013 that didn't do as well as the original.
To help me capture the Smurfs. Hello! I call them...
Hello, kitty.
The Naughties. Deeply disappointing experiment.
So a reboot last year brought the little blue guys and gal back to the world of animation, where Smurfette finally isn't surrounded by little blue men, an aspect of the show that had faced criticism.
Girls, protection mode.
And for the characters who live in the little mushroom houses, the Smurfs fittingly became UN ambassadors last year, helping to educate children about climate change, something that is also integral to the exhibit in Brussels.
We discover the Smurfs, we discover their customs, their village, their way of life and how they communicate, and then, most importantly, we're tasked with a mission that is destroying the infernal machine that's being built by Gargamel, and that would cause great damage to the climate.
With the exhibition costing around €5 million, the organisers hope to take the Smurf experience and the future of the characters to new heights.
John le Carré is jumping on the retro bandwagon with his action-packed story called The Little Drummer Girl. But this tale is as far from Stranger Things as possible. Le Carré is premiering the controversial tale of how several decades ago, 2 Americans pretended to be Palestinian in order to track down what Israeli spies called a terrorist. The film, like the book, has caused an uproar by not taking any sides in one of the world's most heated conflicts.
You cannot stop the devil.
Set in the 1970s, The Little Drummer Girl is about how perspectives can change depending on where you're standing and when. An Israeli spy master, Martin Kurtz, wants to kill Khalil, a young Palestinian whom Kurtz thinks is behind several bombings in Europe.
What's the character?
Charlie is an actor who's recruited by Kurtz to track down Khalil. She pretends to be in a relationship with someone in his circle, but she ends up having inner conflicts trying to fulfill her mission. At the world premiere in London, the cast and crew talked about the series.
I think when you watch these spy films or spy series or you read these books, everybody does things in a certain air that they're perfect at doing everything and they just do stuff with such ease. And I think what I loved specifically about my character was that she wasn't from that at all. And us as the audience, we watch her like we are her, and she is someone from this very normal world that is quickly becoming part of it. And I loved that. I loved playing it, and I loved watching her because she's just so funny and awkward and weird and normal. Who are you people?
We are friends. Friends who must do the unavoidable from time to time.
Swedish actor Alexander Skarsgård's character Becca is pretending to be a young Palestinian. And the actor says amongst all the mind games and mystery, the story has a deeper message to deliver.
It's real. What's so beautiful about John le Carré's writing is it is nuanced, and it's not the good Israelis against the evil Palestinians. All these characters are real, and you feel hopefully compassion for both of them, with the plight of both people, and which is something that my character is struggling with because he has gone undercover so many times and he's really embraced the other side, and I think that's what's lacking in our society. That as long as our enemy is faceless, it's easy to kind of see the world in black and white, and for Becker it is getting more complicated than that. He realizes how complex it is, and it's tough for him to know which side he really is on.
John le Carré's sons Stephen and Simon Cornwell are the executive producers of the series, just like they were for The Night Manager. Their father, who's considered as the master of plot twists and spy novels, says there's more to come from the family.
I don't know what my sons will do next, something of mine, I'm sure. But more particularly, I've just written a new novel, and I hope to see it out next year, so there is a future.
The 6-episode-long miniseries The Little Drummer Girl premieres on the 19th of November.
Drama with reality, it's very dangerous.
The Russian Revolution was a turbulent time in the region's history, but it also spawned great art. A new exhibition at Istanbul Sakip Sabancı Museum is bringing new life to Russian avant-garde, a movement which still permeates today. We sent Adol Halim to check it out.
The Russian avant-garde movement helped shape the art world in the 20th century. It emerged when the Russian Empire was on its way out and the Soviet Union was on the rise.
This was a time of political and social turmoil. We're speaking about the beginning of the 20th century, from the 1910s up to the 1930s, that is before and after the Russian Revolution of 1917. And of course, this period was also very interesting in terms of experimentations in the arts. So this is what we're showing in this exhibition, how art and design came together in order to influence the people and in order to make new proposals to change the aesthetics of everyday life.
And while the revolution was short-lived, avant-garde ideas continued to clash with the state, and the movement was driven underground, making this comprehensive collection of works even more rare.
So many new ideas in terms of politics, in terms of social changes, in terms of technological changes, that the artists could not be indifferent in all that. So this aesthetic phenomenon of Russian avant-garde is really one of the most important chapters in the world history.
But the avant-garde movement had its unfulfilled promises as well. Tatlin's Tower was supposed to be the headquarters of the Comintern, the international organization that advocated world communism. However, it was never built. And while the genre had its failing, it was also ahead of its time.
This exhibition highlights what is described as a very important era of art history, a time of change and transformation where, for the first time, women played a vital role in European art, leading the Russian avant-garde art scene.
There was a feminist movement which is not connected with what we know in the West as the feminist movement that came at that time. It came up much more normal, and it came together with the new ideology of changing the life, of being equal. Equality was a very strong point at that time in Russia.
One such female artist is futurist painter Olga Rozanova, whose very first painting was the starting point of this collection. And she was not alone.
A lot of talented, gifted and genius women came in this period to the stage of literature, art, and all other different spheres of the life.
Elena Titova says women brought new and unique techniques to decorative art. Her museum in Moscow brought more than 500 pieces to this exhibition. Art which could have been lost forever because of
a century of revolutions, century of wars, world wars, century of broken all rules.
For a brief moment in history, new rules allowed a new wave of creativity and expression to flourish and influence modern art forever. Adil Halim, TRT World, Istanbul.
Black Mirror. No, not the hit Netflix show. London's Saatchi Gallery wants you to view the now famous term through the lens of art. 26 contemporary artists have come together in an exhibition designed to expose modern anxieties and obsessions, all with a touch of humor. Showcase's Miranda Addy went to see it for herself.
We're living in a world of collective unease. As a society, we are more anxious than ever about politics, our place in the world, and the future. To allay some of those fears, the Saatchi Gallery is displaying 170 sculptures, installations, photography and collages in a new exhibition called Black Mirror, Art and Social Satire. James Howard's work is an installation made up of 35 digital prints.
Well, this work was made about 10 or 11 years ago,
and at the time it was an attempt to kind of harness a lot of the energy that was flying around, particularly online in those days, via links which I found in all sorts of spam emails and on lots of crazy corners of the internet, and try to combine those things to release huge amounts of energy in artworks.
James is fascinated by language. His reimagined spam contains numerous spelling mistakes, errors and inconsistencies.
I wouldn't say it's design so much as a kind of an instinct. I try to allow these things to take form because, you know, the material itself has certain kind of mysterious powers. When you're making art and you feel this sudden release of energy, you know it. And this is the sort of thing that I'm addicted to as an artist.
Other notable pieces include Niagara Falls by Valerie Hegarty, a comment on environmental degradation, colonization and repressed histories. Wendy Mayer's incredibly lifelike doll sculpture. And this work, Introduction, by Dominic McGill, in collaboration with Turkish professor of Ottoman history, Murat Cem Menguk.
We're trying to create a sort of like a contemporary history painting. So we're taking quotes and images from hundreds of different sources, putting them together to create. It's not a direct narrative. It's a narrative that you work your way through.
For Dominic, the process of history itself is very ideological. He's interested in different histories that are associated with different cultures, how the Russian perspective differs from America, the Middle East or Africa.
All the quotes are about how ideology works, how it informs us to live in a certain way without asking questions, because we just assume that that's the way the world is. It's the man as a product of society, and yet society is a product of man, and it's this endless circular argument.
Black Mirror raises questions we can all relate to. What influence does political uncertainty have on our lives and on our sense of self? And what role should art like this play in commenting on divisive politics? Some of the work may be darker than others, but ultimately the Saatchi Gallery hopes these pieces will provide some sort of light relief in these unsettling times. Black Mirror is on show at the London Gallery until January. Miranda Atty, TRT World, London.
We've come to the end of today's edition of Showcase. Remember, you can find all of our stories about the international art scene on our YouTube channel. But before signing off, let's pay tribute to painter Pablo Picasso. He is arguably the single most influential Spaniard who has shaped the modern art world. And on the anniversary of his birth, we thought we'd rewind and explore how his creation of Cubism evolved. I'm Efnan Han. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
In his career spanning nearly 80 years, Pablo Picasso experimented with various disciplines, including ceramics and sculpting. But of course, he's best known as the leading founder of the Cubist movement. To appreciate the value of Cubism, we need to go back to the early 1900s, during Picasso's early years as an artist. The first decade alone marked three well-known phases for Picasso. In blue and rose periods, he entirely abandoned realism, depicting those living in despair in Bohemian Paris. His work further delved into the absurd in his African period, where he famously became less figurative and more abstract. The idea was looking past the obvious and seeing things anew, reflecting the 20th century zeitgeist. And Cubism completely epitomized this idea. along with French painter Georges Braque, Picasso ushered in a style that reflected the era's optimistic rejection of war and embraced invention. Alongside Cubism came the invention of the X-ray, Freud's theory on human subconsciousness, and Einstein's discoveries about the universe. That optimism would be later replaced with Picasso's anti-war masterpiece Guernica. And for this, Cubism worked as a stepping stone for the artist, who once opined that he would not be defined by a single artistic vision.